Imagine you're on vacation in paradise. White sand beaches stretch as far as the eye can see. The turquoise water of the Mexican Caribbean glitters under the tropical sun, and your five-star hotel awaits with ice-cold margaritas and hammocks swaying gently in the ocean breeze. Cancún, the dream destination where millions of tourists find their perfect escape every year. A place where worries dissolve like salt in the sea, and where every sunset paints the sky in impossible colors. But what if I told you that beneath this facade of tropical paradise, one of the most exclusive hotels on the Riviera Maya concealed a chilling secret for exactly 31 years? A secret so dark that when it finally came to light in 2024, investigators couldn't believe what they were seeing. Imagine stepping into a hotel room that has remained untouched since 1993. Suitcases lie open on the beds, covered by a thick layer of dust accumulated over 3 decades. A swimsuit hangs from a chair, stiff with time, and there on the nightstand a broken camera, the roll of film still inside, holding the last images of people who never came home. What they found was more horrifying than anyone could have imagined. This is the true story of 24 tourists who came to paradise seeking an unforgettable vacation and found something else entirely. Be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more cases like this, and turn on the notification bell. Let me know in the comments what country you're watching from. Among the 24 tourists who vanished on that fateful morning of July 15, 1993, were life stories that deserve to be told, faces that need to be remembered as more than just a statistic. Sarah and Michael Thompson, aged 28 and 31, had come from Manchester, England to celebrate their honeymoon. Sarah, a pediatric nurse at the Manchester Royal Infirmary, had saved for 2 years for this dream trip. She wore a white linen dress she'd bought especially for photos on the beach. And Michael, a civil engineer, had brought his new Nikon camera to document every moment. Their last postcard, sent the day before they disappeared, read, "Paradise exists and it's in Cancun. Mum, we're having the time of our lives. Love, S&M." Roberto Mendez, 45, an amateur photographer from Buenos Aires, Argentina, had won this trip in a photography contest. He was traveling alone, with 3 cameras hanging from his neck and a notebook where he obsessively jotted down every detail of light and shadow he found. He always wore the same blue Hawaiian shirt with yellow palm trees, a good luck charm from his 15-year-old daughter. His last message was a call from the hotel lobby's phone booth at 9:47 a.m. "Sweetheart, we're going on an incredible excursion today. I'll bring you back the best pictures of the Caribbean you've ever seen." Ana Petrova, a 34-year-old single mother from Moscow, Russia, had arrived with her 8-year-old twins, Dmitry and Natasha. A literature professor at Moscow State University, she had sold her grandmother's jewelry to afford this trip, the first time her children had ever been outside of Russia. The kids wore identical red caps with Cancun embroidered in gold, a gift their mother had bought them at the airport. Anna wore an emerald green sarong over her black swimsuit and always carried a beach bag filled with sunscreen and sand toys. Klaus Weber, a 52-year-old textile entrepreneur from Munich, Germany, had come with his wife, Ingrid, to celebrate their 25th wedding anniversary. Klaus, meticulous as you'd expect, had planned every day of the trip with military precision. He wore khaki shorts and a crisp white polo shirt, while Ingrid sported a wide-brimmed straw hat and a floral dress she'd bought for the occasion. Yuki Tanaka, 23, from Tokyo, Japan, was the youngest of the group. A recent graphic design graduate, this trip was her graduation present to herself. She carried a fluorescent pink backpack full of markers and sketchbooks where she drew everything she saw. Her last drawing, found in her room, depicted the sunrise over the Caribbean Sea dated July 15th, 6 a.m., captioned, "The most beautiful day." These were just some of the faces, the lives, the dreams that were cut short that day. Real people with families waiting for them, with jobs to return to, with futures they would never get to live. July 15th, 1993, dawned like any other day at the Coral Paradise Hotel in Cancun. At 5:45 a.m., the sun began to paint the horizon in shades of orange and pink as seagulls started their morning dance above the waves. The thermometer already read 28 degrees Celsius, and the humidity promised another typical Caribbean summer day. At 7 a.m., the hotel's main restaurant opened its doors for the breakfast buffet. Sarah Thompson was one of the first to arrive, dragging along a sleepy Michael who protested that they were on their honeymoon and should be sleeping in. Roberto Mendez was already on the terrace, capturing the first rays of sun with his camera, his steaming coffee sitting untouched on the table as he chased the perfect light. The Petrova twins ran between the tables, their mother Ana chasing them with plates of fresh fruit, begging them in Russian to sit down. At 8:30 a.m., the hotel's tour guide, Carlos Dominguez, a 35-year-old man with a perpetual smile and a tan that seemed etched into his skin, began to gather the group in the lobby. He wore the hotel's signature uniform, white pants, a navy blue shirt with the Coral Paradise logo embroidered in gold, and a captain's hat that gave him an air of friendly authority. "Good morning, everyone. Ready for today's adventure?" His voice boomed with practiced enthusiasm as he did a head count on his clipboard. By 9:15 a.m., all 24 tourists had assembled in the lobby. Klaus Weber, true to his German nature, had arrived 15 minutes early and was waiting impatiently, checking his watch every 30 seconds. Yuki Tanaka came running in, her pink backpack bouncing on her shoulders, apologizing profusely in broken English for losing track of time while drawing. At 9:45 a.m., the group posed for what would be their last photograph together. In front of the hotel fountain, with its crystal-clear water jets and a backdrop of fuchsia bougainvillea, 24 smiling faces looked at the hotel photographer's camera. Sarah and Michael in the center, arms around each other, the Petrova twins making funny faces. Roberto Mendez at one end holding his own camera as if to take a picture of the person photographing them. Klaus and Ingrid Weber standing tall and formal. Yuki, flashing her inevitable peace sign, an image frozen in time that would later appear on news broadcasts around the world. At 10:30 a.m., the exact time recorded in the hotel's departure log, the group boarded a blue and white bus with Coral Paradise Tours painted in gold letters on the side. The vehicle, a 1991 Mercedes-Benz with air conditioning and tinted windows, pulled out of the hotel's main gate. The security guard, Ramon Gutierrez, noted the time in his log and raised the barrier. It would be the last time anyone from the hotel would see the tourists alive. The excursion promised a full day. First, a visit to a sacred cenote 45 minutes from the hotel, followed by a traditional lunch at a local restaurant, and finally an afternoon of snorkeling at a nearby reef. The itinerary indicated a scheduled return at 6 p.m. At 12:15 p.m., a security camera at a Pemex gas station on Federal Highway 307 captured the hotel bus speeding past. The grainy, blurry image, typical of 1993 security recordings, would later reveal a disturbing detail. The bus was heading in the opposite direction of its planned route. At 2:30 p.m., Maria Gonzalez, an employee at the La Palapa del Mayab restaurant where the group was scheduled to have lunch, called the hotel to ask if there had been a change of plans. The tables reserved for 25 people were still empty, and the specially prepared food was spoiling in the kitchen. At 4 p.m., something strange happened. Carlos Dominguez, the tour guide, appeared alone at the hotel reception. He was sweaty, his shirt was disheveled, and he had an expression the clerk on duty, Pedro Alvarez, would later describe as vacant, as if he weren't really there. He mumbled something about the tourists deciding to stay longer at the cenote and that they would return on their own. Then he went up to his employee room on the third floor and was never seen again. At 6:45 p.m., the first real alarm bell was sounded when the housekeeper, Esperanza Ramos, reported something unusual. During her evening rounds, she noticed that none of the group's rooms had been touched since the morning. The beds were still unmade from the night before, the damp towels from morning showers were in the same place, and most strangely, in room 417, the Thompsons' room, an open suitcase lay on the bed with a still damp swimsuit on top, as if Sarah had planned to change right after returning. By 7:30 p.m., the hotel manager, Fernando Castillo, began making frantic calls. First to the local police, then to hospitals, then to other hotels. No one had seen the group of tourists. At 8:20 p.m., the Coral Paradise Hotel officially reported 24 tourists and 1 employee missing. The Benito Juarez Municipal Police arrived at the hotel at 9:05 p.m. By then, nearly 11 hours had passed, since the blue and white bus had driven through the main gate. The lobby clock read 11:58 p.m. when the first relative called from England. It was Sarah Thompson's mother, worried because her daughter hadn't called as she'd promised. The night clerk, unsure what to say, could only manage that there had been a small setback and that they would call as soon as they had news. July 15, 1993, ended with 24 empty beds at the Coral Paradise Hotel and the beginning of a mystery that would take 31 years to solve. The initial investigation was, to be generous, a disaster of epic proportions. The Benito Juarez Municipal Police, more accustomed to dealing with drunk tourists and bar fights than with mass disappearances, treated the case from the start as if the tourists had simply wandered off into the jungle. The commander in charge, Joaquin Herrera, a 58-year-old on the verge of retirement, stated at the first press conference, "They probably got lost exploring some cenote. The Quintana Roo jungle is treacherous. We'll find them in a couple of days, dehydrated but alive." The first 48 hours, crucial in any missing persons investigation, were lost in a tangle of incompetence and negligence. 3 initial theories were floated, each more far-fetched than the last. First, a mass drowning in an unmapped cenote. Divers were sent to all known cenotes within a 100-kilometer radius, finding nothing. Second, a voluntary escape, as if 24 people of different nationalities had spontaneously decided to disappear together in Mexico. The third, whispered but never officially investigated, was a drug cartel attack, though there was no evidence of such criminal activity in the tourist zone at the time. The errors piled up like falling dominoes. No one thought to secure the missing persons' rooms as crime scenes. For 3 days, cleaning staff continued to enter, destroying potential evidence. The tourists' belongings were packed up and stored in the hotel basement for when they return, as if they were just coming back from a long walk. But the most unforgivable mistake involved the hotel's security footage. The Coral Paradise's surveillance system, standard for 1993, consisted of 8 VHS cameras that recorded onto 8-hour tapes, which were recycled every 3 days. When the police finally requested the recordings 5 days after the disappearance, the crucial day's tapes had already been recorded over twice. Only a partial tape from the parking lot survived, showing the bus leaving, but nothing more. On July 20th, 5 days after the disappearance, 2 hotel employees became prime suspects and then fugitives. Jorge Delgado, 28, a night maintenance worker, and Luis Ramirez, 31, from the security department, failed to show up for work. When police went to their homes, they were gone. Their rooms in the employee dormitory were empty as if they had never existed. Neighbors reported seeing them leave with suitcases on the night of July 16th, but no one thought it was suspicious. "Lots of people come and go in Cancun," one neighbor said. "It's normal." The investigation was further complicated by the technological context of 1993. There were no cell phones to track, no GPS to follow the bus's route. Hotel records were manual, handwritten in ledgers that anyone could alter. City security cameras were virtually non-existent. The internet was in its infancy, and there was no quick way to coordinate information between countries. The FBI became briefly involved when it was confirmed that American citizens were among the missing. But with no real jurisdiction in Mexico and with local police jealously guarding their territory, they could do little more than offer technical assistance, which was politely declined. Scotland Yard sent 2 detectives after the Thompson family pressured the British government. But after 2 weeks of hitting a wall of language barriers and Mexican bureaucracy, they returned to London empty-handed. By August 1993, 1 month after the disappearance, the investigation was at a complete standstill. Every hotel employee had been interviewed, except for the 2 who had vanished. The bus's supposed route had been traced. The jungle had been scoured with helicopters and search dogs. Nothing. It was as if 24 people and a bus had simply evaporated into the humid tropical air of Cancun. What do you think really happened? Did the police overlook something obvious? Leave your theory in the comments as I delve into the years of anguish that followed. And if this story is impacting you, please hit like so more people can learn about this case. The official investigation was temporarily closed on December 15, 1993, exactly 5 months after the disappearance. The final 127-page report concluded with a sentence that would chill the families to the bone. No conclusive evidence was found regarding the whereabouts or fate of the 24 missing tourists. They are presumed dead from unknown causes. The case was relegated to the cold files. Another statistic in the annals of Mexican mystery. The years that followed were a slow, silent torture for the families of the 24 tourists. Every July 15th, in a painful but necessary ritual, groups of relatives would travel to Cancun from all corners of the world. They would gather in front of the Coral Paradise Hotel, which, incredibly, continued to operate as if nothing had happened, and lay flowers at the fountain where the last photograph had been taken. Red roses from Sarah Thompson's mother, white chrysanthemums from the Tanaka family, sunflowers from Roberto Mendez's parents. In 1997, 4 years after the disappearance, the first glimmer of false hope emerged. A fisherman in Cozumel swore he had seen a group of foreigners living in a commune deep in the jungle. The news spread like wildfire. Families flew to Mexico, expeditions were organized, but when they reached the specified location, they found only a group of American hippies who had arrived in Mexico in 1995. The disillusionment was crushing. The year 2003 brought another cruel twist. A supposed former hotel employee contacted the Weber family anonymously from a payphone in Mexico City. He claimed to have information about what really happened, that there were documents, that there was evidence. He asked for $50,000 for the information. The family, desperate, paid. The man never contacted them again. Police traced the call to a public phone in the Tepito neighborhood, but the trail went cold there. After 8 years of sepulchral silence in 2006, tragedy struck the Mendez family twice over. Roberto Mendez's younger brother, also named Roberto, took his own life. He left a note that simply read, "I can't keep chasing ghosts. Forgive me, brother, for giving up." He was 35 years old, the same age his brother was when he disappeared. His death sent shockwaves through the community of families that had formed around the tragedy. A brutal reminder that grief does not diminish with time, it only transforms. On September 18, 2001, amid the chaos following 9/11, the case was officially archived by the Mexican authorities. The decision went almost unnoticed by the media, eclipsed by the tragedy in New York. For the families, it was another devastating blow. The message was clear. The world had moved on. Their loved ones were now just a dusty file in some forgotten archive. In 2011, a new flash of hope appeared, this time a technological one. A group of activist hackers called Digital Justice claimed to have breached the Coral Paradise Hotel's servers and found deleted files from 1993. They published documents on WikiLeaks that supposedly showed financial irregularities at the hotel right after the disappearance. But when digital forensic experts analyzed the documents, they were found to be elaborate forgeries. The group vanished as mysteriously as it had appeared. The year 2015 marked a particularly painful moment. The Petrova twins, Dmitry and Natasha, now 30 years old, traveled to Cancun for the first time since their mother vanished. They had been raised by their grandmother in Moscow, growing up with the ghost of a mother they knew only from photographs. Standing in front of the hotel, Natasha broke down. "I don't even remember her voice," she sobbed as her brother held her. In 2019, the final false lead arrived in the form of a sensationalist Netflix documentary that theorized the tourists had been abducted by aliens. The show vanished. The Mexican Bermuda Triangle was watched by millions but caused outrage among the families. Margaret Thompson, Sarah's mother, now 82, appeared on British television to condemn the program. "My daughter wasn't abducted by aliens," she declared. "She was the victim of a crime that no one wants to solve." Through all these years, the Coral Paradise Hotel continued to operate. It changed owners 3 times, it was renovated twice, it changed its name to the Paradise Beach Resort in 2010. But locals and some tourists who knew the story still called it the Hotel of the Disappeared. Reviews on TripAdvisor occasionally mentioned strange energies and unsettling feelings, but most guests had no idea of the place's dark history. The oldest employees, the few who remained from 1993, spoke in whispers about strange noises in the night, about doors that opened on their own, about room 467, the Thompsons' room, which had to be permanently closed because no guest could ever last a full night there. But they were just stories, urban legends that grew with each telling. By 2020, when the pandemic shut down global tourism, it seemed the case of the 24 missing tourists would remain forever unsolved, another victim of time and indifference. The families, many now thinned by the years, some with no descendants left to continue the search, were beginning to accept that they would never know the truth. But fate, that cruel architect of coincidence, had other plans. On February 12, 2024, at exactly 2:47 p.m., according to the official report, 2 construction workers, Miguel Hernandez and Jose Luis Portillo, were carrying out renovations in the basement of the old Coral Paradise Hotel, now the Paradise Beach Resort. The hotel had been sold again, this time to an international chain planning a complete overhaul to turn it into an ultra-luxury, all-inclusive resort. Miguel, 43, a construction veteran with 20 years of experience, was demolishing a wall in the oldest section of the basement, a section that, according to the blueprints, had been sealed off since 1994, just a year after the disappearance. "It was strange," he would later recall in his testimony. "The blueprints showed nothing but earth behind that wall. But when my hammer hit it, it sounded hollow." Jose Luis, 29, in his first year as a construction worker, noticed something even stranger. The wall wasn't made of the same material as the rest of the basement. It was newer, as if it had been built later to cover something up. Driven by professional curiosity, they began to carefully demolish the wall. What they found behind it left them frozen in place, a metal door, painted the same color as the walls to camouflage it, with an industrial padlock that, though rusted, was still firmly locked. But what truly chilled their blood was what was etched into the door, apparently with some sharp object. 24/7/93. Miguel immediately called his supervisor, who called the hotel manager, who, after a moment of panic, called the police. By 3:30 p.m., the basement was swarming with officers. The padlock was cut with industrial shears. The door, groaning open with a sound straight out of a horror film, revealed a narrow corridor that descended even deeper. The smell hit them first. It wasn't the smell of death they expected after 31 years, but something more disturbing. A scent of dampness mixed with something chemical, like formaldehyde. The officers' flashlights cut through the darkness, illuminating unpainted concrete walls and a floor that sloped gently downward. At the end of the corridor there was a room, and in that room the first piece of real evidence in 31 years. Against the far wall, stacked with almost military precision, were 24 passports in a wooden box. The officers, wearing latex gloves, opened them one by one. Sarah Thompson, United Kingdom. Michael Thompson, United Kingdom. Roberto Mendez, Argentina. Ana Petrova, Russia. Dmitry Petrov, Russia. Natasha Petrova, Russia. Each name, a life lost. Each photograph, a gaze frozen in time. But there was more. In a corner, an old security camera, one of those large, cumbersome models from the 90s, was still mounted on its bracket. Incredibly, its small red power light was still faintly blinking. It had been recording on a continuous loop for 31 years, fed by a rogue electrical connection that no one had ever detected. Inside, trapped in the mechanism, was a VHS tape. Forensic technicians extracted it with the care of a bomb disposal expert. The room held more horrors, dark stains on the concrete floor that initial analysis would confirm as human blood. Scraps of fabric that matched descriptions of the clothes worn by some of the tourists. And most disturbingly, a metal filing cabinet containing detailed documents. A kind of macabre inventory with names, nationalities, and what appeared to be prices in US dollars next to each name. In another corner, they found something that would shake the foundations of the Mexican hotel industry. A list of other hotels with dates ranging from 1991 to 1995 and numbers next to each date. It would take investigators weeks to confirm what those numbers meant. But the initial suspicion was terrifying. News of the discovery leaked to the press within hours. By midnight on February 12th, every news channel in the world was leading with the story. After 31 years, evidence of 24 missing tourists found in Cancún. The families, many now elderly, some represented by their children and grandchildren, began to fly to Mexico once more, but this time with a mixture of hope and terror for what they might discover. The 2024 investigation was a world away from the botched effort of 1993. This time, the case was assigned to the Specialized High-Impact Crimes Investigation Unit of the Attorney General's Office, with full support from Interpol and unprecedented cooperation from the FBI. The team, led by Special Prosecutor Carmen Rodriguez, a 45-year-old woman with a flawless record of solving cold cases, set up their command center in the hotel itself. The first priority was the VHS tape. Technicians from the National Institute of Forensic Sciences worked for 72 hours straight to extract and digitize the content without damaging the tape, which was in an extremely fragile state after 31 years. What they found was limited but crucial: 47 minutes of footage from July 15, 1993. The tape showed what appeared to be a preparation room. At 11:43 a.m., According to the timestamp, several of the tourists could be seen being brought into the room, clearly sedated or unconscious. Roberto Mendez was carried by two men, later identified as Jorge Delgado and Luis Ramirez, the two employees who had disappeared days later. Sarah Thompson appeared briefly conscious but visibly disoriented, before someone off-camera injected her in the arm. The Petrova twins, the most heartbreaking to see, were huddled in a corner, crying and holding each other. But the most revealing moment came at 12:15 p.m. A man walked into the frame, clearly unaware he was being recorded. The image enhancement technology of 2024 allowed for an unmistakable identification. Ernesto Villanueva, who in 1993 was the hotel's chief of security and who, curiously, had been transferred to a hotel in Panama just 1 month after the disappearance. The truth was more disturbing than any theory. DNA analysis of the bloodstains on the floor matched samples provided by the families. The presence of at least 12 of the 24 tourists in that room was confirmed. But there wasn't enough evidence of violence to suggest they were murdered there. The blood seemed to be from minor wounds, possibly from struggles or poorly administered injections. The documents from the filing cabinet revealed something even more sinister. They weren't just records, they were contracts. Personnel transfer contracts with code names but with physical descriptions that perfectly matched the missing tourists. The prices varied: $50,000 for Sarah Thompson, described as premium merchandise, nurse, fluent English. $30,000 for each of the Petrova twins, $75,000 for the entire Weber family, with a note that read, "Buyers in Saudi Arabia interested." The digital investigation uncovered an international network. The documents mentioned coordination with hotels in Cartagena, Colombia, Punta Cana, Dominican Republic, Acapulco, Mexico. Each location corresponded with unresolved disappearances of tourists in the 1990s. The pattern was chilling: small groups of tourists, usually from developed countries, vanishing during hotel-organized excursions. Ernesto Villanueva was located in Panama City, where he was incredibly still working in hotel security under a slightly different name, Ernesto Villa. On March 3, 2024, he was arrested in a joint operation by Panamanian and Mexican authorities. During the arrest, he tried to destroy a laptop, which, once recovered by forensic experts, was found to contain encrypted files with more evidence of the trafficking network. The investigation also revealed the fate of the tour guide Carlos Dominguez. His remains were found in 2024 in a clandestine grave 50 kilometers from Cancún, identified through dental records. He had apparently been murdered on the same night of July 15, 1993, likely because he refused to participate or threatened to talk. The hotel's financial analysis showed suspicious transfers in the weeks following the disappearance. Over $2 million were deposited into the hotel's accounts from tax havens. Money that was later laundered through supposed renovations and improvements that were never carried out. Modern technology also made it possible to finally track the missing bus. Using declassified satellite images from 1993 and advanced spectral analysis, investigators pinpointed what appeared to be the buried vehicle in a now urbanized area of Cancun. The excavation, carried out in April of 2024, confirmed it was the bus. But it was empty. Spotlessly clean, not a single fingerprint or trace of DNA remained. By May 2024, the investigation had identified 17 individuals involved in the network, 8 of whom were still alive. The arrest operation, codenamed Operation Return, was executed simultaneously across 5 countries on May 15, 2024. What you are about to discover is more disturbing than you can imagine. If you think you can handle it, continue watching. And remember to subscribe if you haven't already. On May 20th, 2024, after 5 days of interrogation and faced with overwhelming evidence, Ernesto Villanueva began to confess. Over the next 2 weeks, prosecutor Carmen Rodriguez would record 47 hours of testimony, a narrative that would unveil one of the most elaborate and cruel crimes in the history of global tourism. Villanueva, now 66 years old, his hair completely gray and his hands trembling, began his confession with a sentence that would chill the blood. "It wasn't the first time," he said, "and we weren't the only ones." According to his testimony, he was part of an international human trafficking ring that had operated since the late 1980s, using luxury hotels and popular tourist destinations as a front for their operations. The network, known internally as La Cofradía del Sol, the Brotherhood of the Sun, an ironic name considering the darkness of its activities, was founded by a former Colombian military officer known only as El Comandante. He had seen a business opportunity in the tourism boom of the 90s. The idea was simple, yet monstrous. Tourists from developed countries would vanish in third-world nations where police corruption was endemic and investigations were notoriously poor. The method for the Cancún case had been meticulously planned for months. The 24 tourists were not chosen at random. Each had been carefully selected based on specific criteria. They were traveling alone or in small groups with no local connections. They had paid in cash or with cards that wouldn't leave an easy trail. And most importantly, they had physical or professional traits that made them valuable on the black market. Sarah Thompson, the nurse, was marked from the moment she listed her profession on her registration form. Buyers in the Middle East paid fortunes for Western medical personnel to staff illegal private clinics. Her husband, Michael, was collateral damage taken simply because they couldn't leave a witness. Roberto Mendez, with his knowledge of photography in several languages, was destined for an illicit audiovisual production studio in Asia. The Petrova twins. Villanueva paused here, unable to continue for several minutes. When he resumed, he only said they were sold to private collectors in Eastern Europe. Their mother, Ana, had tried to fight back. She injured one of the captors and was the first to be processed. On July 15, 1993, the plan was executed with military precision. The real tour bus never reached the cenote. Instead, it was diverted to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Cancún, owned by a network member. There, the tourists were sedated with an incapacitating agent introduced through the vehicle's air conditioning system. Carlos Dominguez, the tour guide, was not part of the plan. When he realized what was happening, he tried to escape and was killed on the spot. The unconscious tourists were then moved in small groups back to the hotel, specifically to a basement area that had been prepared weeks in advance. The false wall was already in place, ready to be sealed once the merchandise was processed and shipped. Over the next 18 hours, the tourists were prepared for transport, documented, photographed, and assigned to their final buyers. The transport was carried out through an underground tunnel that connected the hotel's basement to a private pier 800 meters away. This tunnel, originally built during World War II as part of a smuggling network, had been inherited by the criminal organization. From the pier, the tourists, still unconscious, were loaded onto different vessels that would take them to their final destinations. Villanueva provided chilling details about their fates. 5 tourists, including the Webbers, were sent to Saudi Arabia via a route that passed through Cuba and North Africa. Sarah Thompson ended up in an illegal clinic in Pakistan, where she was forced to treat wounded militants. Michael Thompson, according to the records, did not survive the journey, dying from an allergic reaction to the sedative somewhere in the Indian Ocean. His body was thrown overboard. The Petrova twins were separated, a standard procedure Villanueva described as they sold for more individually. Dmitry was sent to Belgium, Natasha to Germany. Their mother Anna, after her attempt at resistance, was deemed damaged goods and was eliminated in the hotel basement itself. Her body incinerated in the industrial furnace of the hotel laundry. Roberto Mendez met perhaps the most ironic fate. He was sold to a photography studio in Thailand that produced illegal material. For years, he was forced to use his photographic skills to document crimes. According to Villanueva, Mendez tried to escape in 1997 and was executed. The network operated with a terrifying corporate efficiency. They had departments: acquisition for identifying targets, logistics for transport, finance for money laundering, and even customer service for keeping the buyers satisfied. The hotels involved received substantial payments, money that was laundered through phantom renovations and bribes to corrupt officials. The Hotel Coral Paradise was not an isolated case. Villanueva confirmed similar operations in at least 11 other hotels across Latin America and the Caribbean between 1989 and 1996. The total number of victims, by his conservative estimate, exceeded 400 people. The network officially disbanded in 1997, when international pressure and improvements in security technology made the operations too risky. But some members continued to operate independently. Villanueva admitted to participating in at least 3 smaller operations between 1998 and 2003, though he swore he had retired after that. He had lived the last 20 years in constant fear of being discovered, changing his identity 3 times, moving between countries. The confession included names, dates, locations, bank accounts. Every detail would be verified, every lead followed. By June 2024, authorities from 15 countries were involved in the investigation. Bank accounts in Switzerland, the Cayman Islands, and Cyprus were frozen, with assets exceeding $50 million, presumed to be the network's profits. In August 2024, 3 potential survivors were located: a woman in Bangladesh who had been sold as Sarah Thompson, although DNA tests proved it wasn't her; a man in Morocco who might be one of the German tourists; and most surprisingly, a 39-year-old woman in Belgium who claimed to remember nothing before the age of 10 and whose DNA was being compared to Natasha Petrova's. The search for survivors continues as I write this, but hopes are slim. Most, according to Villanueva, did not survive more than 5 years in captivity. Those who did have likely built new identities, new lives, with no memory or desire to remember the horror they endured. On January 15, 2025, exactly 31 years and 6 months after the disappearance, Ernesto Villanueva was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole by a Mexican federal court. The sentence was read to a courtroom filled with the victims' families. Many had waited over 3 decades for this moment. Margaret Thompson, now 85 and in a wheelchair, wept silently as the judge pronounced the word guilty 24 times, once for each stolen life. The other 7 arrested members received sentences ranging from 25 years to life. The international network was officially dismantled, though authorities admit that sleeper cells or copycats may still exist. A compensation fund of $100 million was established for the families, money recovered from the network's frozen accounts. The Hotel Coral Paradise, that monument to horror disguised as paradise, lost its operating license in February 2025. For a year, it stood empty, a concrete shell of terrible memories facing the Caribbean Sea. Locals avoided it. Tourists took pictures from a distance, and at night, some swore they saw lights in the windows of the 3rd floor, in room 417. On July 15, 2026, on the 33rd anniversary of the disappearance, the hotel was demolished in a ceremony attended by victims' families from around the world. Each family was given a brick from the building, a tangible piece of the place where their loved ones spent their last hours of freedom. The remaining rubble was crushed and cast into the sea where an artificial reef was created, now named the Memorial of the 24. In the place where the hotel once stood, a memorial park was built. 24 black marble plaques bear the names of the victims, their ages, and a phrase chosen by their families. Sarah Thompson's reads, "Beloved wife and healer, your light shines eternally." Roberto Mendez's, "You captured the beauty of the world, now you are part of it." Ana Petrova's simply says in Russian, "A brave mother to the end." Every year on July 15th, a ceremony is held at sunset. 24 paper lanterns are released into the sky, one for each life lost. It is a reminder that evil can hide in the most beautiful of places, that paradise can become hell, and that justice, however late, can arrive. The case didn't end the day they disappeared, but the day the truth was finally heard. How could such a beautiful place hide so much horror for so long? The answer is simple and terrifying. Because no one wanted to see. The signs were there. Employees were suspicious, guests felt something was wrong, but money, fear, and indifference created a wall of silence that lasted for 31 years. This is the story of the 24 tourists who never came home. If this video has impacted you, please share it. Subscribe to the channel, turn on all notifications, and comment where you're watching from. And remember, when you travel, keep your eyes open. Evil sometimes hides behind the kindest smiles and the most beautiful landscapes.